Welcome back, AP. All right, I know I mentioned this a while back that I was going to be making an example video for your artwork presentation. You're becoming an expert in a piece of Renaissance artwork to help us better our understanding of Renaissance art. What makes it so great? Why was this movement so particularly different from the Middle Ages that came before it? Why does the art serve as a symbol of enduring understanding of intellectual growth and economic growth during this time period, right? So a lot of y'all have been sending me emails and stuff like, what should I do? How much should I know? Etc., etc., etc. Well, let's go over a couple of key things. First of all, this particular element of your summer assignment deserves just as much devotion as Michelangelo and the Pope's Ceiling by Ross King, due to the fact that those two things have to be intertwined into your essay and what your essay itself is going to be written about, right? So it's important to have a very good understanding of how much research is necessary. What do you need to know? Because a lot of these artworks have a lot of information behind them, okay? And it's also important to state that this video is good to watch to give you a good understanding of like how long maybe your presentation itself is supposed to last, okay? Because if you look at the other parts of the summer assignment, mainly the flips and the maps and the Albert I.O. questions, which will be posted next week, but don't freak out. There's only like 5 of them. They're not bad. I just want to see how well you can do with a stimulus-based multiple choice question, which are the types of multiple choice questions that will be on the AP test, okay? So don't worry too much about those. It's a completion grade. It's nothing to fret about, okay? So anyway, continuing forward though, the big thing that a lot of y'all seem to be concerned about, that I've been receiving some emails about, has to do mainly with the presentation itself. Okay, so that's what this video is for. Getting you to understand how much you need to know when you actually present your artwork to the class for their better understanding of the movement, right? So I decided to just take a few minutes to make a video showing you about how long it needs to be. Now, my rule of thumb is about 5 minutes, okay? You can easily show your expertise in an artwork in about 5 minutes. Now, should you just be putting all of your information into that presentation? No, ma'am, all right? You should be expanding on it in your paper, right? In your essay, you can go full tilt and talk about however much you want to compare that piece and contrast that piece of artwork to the Sistine Chapel ceiling by Michelangelo, okay? So do not fret about trying to fit every piece of information from your research into your presentation, because I want 5 minutes of your time, 5, maybe a little bit more, because I like to ask questions a lot, so it might be close to like 10 or something like that. But this video example is going to be about 5, because you're not going to be there asking questions of me. You're not going to be like asking little like clarifying details or anything like that. So I'm doing this to show you what your presentation should look like, not necessarily what your information in total should look like. And to give you some guiding perspectives on what the information in total should look like, or maybe what you should be seeking out, here's like 5 elements. You know, I wrote them down. I'm probably just going to be looking down a little bit and everything like so I can go over them. But I'm going to scroll them up on the screen right here so you can also see them as well. So 5 particular guiding pieces of information when it comes to understanding and researching your artwork itself, okay? So big things that we're going to focus on. Number 1, you want to focus on the physical elements of the piece of artwork, okay? What is it? What's it made out of? Is it paint? What type of paint? What's it painted on? What type of stone is this made out of? Is it made out of bricks? One of you has a building, right? So, like, you need to focus on the physical things about it, dimensions, etc. Where is it housed now? That's a really big thing as well. Where is it located at this present day moment in time? If I wanted to go see it, where would I go to see it, okay? So that's a big thing to kind of start with. Get your early access to the piece so you can see it and really understand where you're going with your information. Second thing I'm going to say, big thing to focus on, is the background of the artwork, all right? Not the background as in the physical background, but the background of the artwork as in, why was it made? Who was it made for? And if that is not available, clarify that it's not available. Some particular pieces of artwork are mired in like losses of history because nobody actually ever recorded who they were for and or why they were painted in the first place. Why is my head? There we go. That's better. All right, so for example, the Arnolfini portrait that one of you are doing, We don't necessarily know if those are even the people that are pictured in the painting itself. It's actually possibly a wedding portrait. It's possibly a funerary portrait. We're not really sure because the people it was made for never wrote down why they had it made. All right, so that's important to know. Okay, the one I'm going to be presenting to you on apparently has a lot of background to it, and several people throughout history have recorded items about it. So it gives me a little bit more ample material. Now, if you can't find those things, then maybe you need to shift your focus a little bit more to the most important ideas behind it. Okay, the third element I will say is like history of the piece. When was it created? Why, etc. As in the years that maybe it was actually the year that it was actually made. That's the words I was looking for. Now, the most important thing to me is the artwork itself. You need to break down the artwork and explain a lot of different things. Artistic elements. You need to tell me what's going on, who is pictured, symbols in the piece, technique that was used, what makes it unique and good. And you will see that in the bulk of the presentation I'm about to give on a particular piece of artwork that I happen to think is kind of overrated. All right, so now further on though, my favorite thing that people always remember the most are interesting facts, all right? Like always big and very important to focus on very interesting little things. For example, like stories behind the artwork. Was it ever vandalized? Was it ever stolen? Was there a reason why it was moved? Did anything happen to it in World War II? Were parts of it damaged? Why were artistic liberties taken? Did the creator leave some little hidden symbols in there that he didn't even expect the patrons themselves to know? That stuff's always really fun, and it kind of actually gives us a little bit of a little tiny element to understanding these artworks on a bigger and more kind of fun and engaging way, so you can actually understand it better. And so before we get any further, I'm going to go ahead and throw a timer up to try and show you that I can explain this overrated piece of artwork in about 5 minutes, okay? So let's go ahead and get started, because I am now going to explain to you the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and get after it. Like I said, this is the Mona Lisa, created by Leonardo da Vinci, all right, from anywhere between the years of 1503 to 1519. 1503 being the earliest mention of it in several different documents from the Renaissance period, and then also 1519 is the year that Leonardo da Vinci died, so we believe it was created anywhere between there. The reason why this is mired in controversy is due to the fact that Leonardo da Vinci never actually signed or dated any of his works, all right? He didn't believe that that was important. Several other artists are going to take this perspective example as well. Michelangelo, for example, did not necessarily sign or date many pieces of art except outside of his one very famous piece known as the Pieta, all right? So, which is a sculpture that is actually inside of the Vatican, which shares a very cool little common trait that I'll talk about later with this piece of artwork, due to the fact that a lot of people like to try and damage stuff, all right? So, but anyway, going further, let's talk about Mona Lisa herself, why this thing was painted in the first place, all right? The reason why this was painted in the first place, it is believed to be a portrait commissioned by a man named Francesco Giocondo, all right? Giocondo, yes. So Francesco was a wealthy silk merchant, and this is believed to be his wife, all right? Lisa Giocondo, all right? So now this was meant to commemorate possibly the birth of their second son, all right? Now, the cool thing about it is we don't necessarily know that for sure, all right? So we don't know necessarily if that is Lisa Giocondo right there. We don't know. We're pretty confident. The art community seems to be about like 70% in the Lisa Giocondo camp. A lot of other art historians have argued it could be one of the members of the Sforza family. It could be a mistress of one of the Medicis. It could be tons of different people. Due to the fact that Leonardo da Vinci didn't really write about why he was making his artworks in particular, he wrote about a lot of different things instead. He actually focused a lot of his intelligence in journals that he used that we will talk about later on. Now, the greatest thing about this artwork in particular is the fact that it never actually even went to the person that it was apparently supposed to be painted for. Leonardo da Vinci never gave it back. He actually kept it until the day he died, all right? It is also believed that he spent years trying to complete it. Possibly he spent somewhere upwards of 4 years, some art historians have claimed, on just doing her hands, which is why they could look kind of listless and lifelike. Or no, listless and without life. That's the word I'm looking for. They look kind of draped over one another, and a lot of people believe that he may have struggled with this one particular piece, coming back and forth to it, not to mention the fact that he's a notorious procrastinator. Da Vinci took long periods of time to finish a lot of different things because he was kind of scatterbrained. He would spend a lot of time doing scientific research, dissecting bodies for autopsy so he could have a better understanding of how the human body works, and so he may have been kind of just distracted for several other different reasons. Now, getting into the art elements itself, it is considered to be one of the best pieces and examples of high Renaissance artwork ever. Notice a couple of different distinctive factors. We have, of course, the lingering gaze, right? The lingering gaze being a very, very odd little like Renaissance piece of artwork technique used by Da Vinci. She's actually looking slightly to your right, okay? Now, however, over time, the gradient of colors gives you the impression that she is actually following you around the room. The other thing, speaking of those gradient colors, is the very, very important piece that Da Vinci never really used a lot of defined lines. He actually would shade a lot of different colors together using a very popular technique at the time called Spemata, all right? Spemata meaning soft, okay? And so he would actually grade multiple layers of colors, trying to create the idea of defined lines without actually necessarily ever doing them, okay? And also another piece of the artwork that a lot of people don't ever actually usually normally see is the fact that she's also wearing a veil, a thin piece of cloth above her head, which could possibly implicate the idea that she is married. Now, anyway, continuing forward, a lot of you are also probably immediately noticing she has no eyebrows, no eyelashes. A lot of us believe in the art community that actually the chances are is that they might have degraded away because a lot of UV light experiments actually show that she did at one point have eyebrows and eyelashes, but they might have been cleaned off, all right? So, which is terrifying to ever think of the idea that somebody might have been cleaning this one day and rubbed the Mona Lisa's eyebrows off. Now, another continuing thing is the smirk. A lot of people are really concerned about the smirk. Is she smiling? Is she frowning? Is she sad? No one knows. Everybody has theories, though. My favorite theory in particular has to be to the fact that somebody believes that, or some art historians have floated the theory that she might have been smiling at something happening off to the side of the picture, because Da Vinci would sometimes hire performers and actors and things like that to try and sit there and entertain the viewer while the artwork itself was being painted, because the models have to sit there for extremely long periods of time. So some people have floated that theory. I also believe in the theory as well. Speaking of the Spemata, the idea that of the soft coating of colors and layering of colors to imply different areas of depth. Possibly, as the painting is aged, these layers of paint may have been damaged slightly due to time, which may have offered up a slight change in the light on that one side of the painting, making it look like maybe she's half smiling. All right. Now, continuing forward also with the entire piece itself, the use of those colors and the use of the realism that is actually used in this particular piece of art, an element of humanism that we talked about in one of our earlier flips, can actually be seen in some of his earlier artworks. This one in particular, known as the Virgin of the Rocks, all right, showing, I believe it's Mary, actually, and you can actually see some of the techniques used, that's Spemata, actually in this particular piece of Mary, as well as in the Mona Lisa. And the Mona Lisa also went on to inspire a lot of other artists and artworks as well. This one, for example, Lady and the Unicorn, or Young Woman with Unicorn by Raphael Urbino, who's two of you have Raphael works. One of you has the Sistine Madonna. Another one of you actually has the School of Athens. So Leonardo da Vinci actually served as a very, very big influential role player in the Renaissance art period, coming before a lot of our heavy hitters in the high Renaissance period. Leonardo da Vinci had already been doing a lot of work before Michelangelo, before Raphael, preceding all those artworks, and actually offering up a lot of inspiration for these different artists and the works that would come after them. Now, another really neat thing about this particular artwork, it has no vanishing point. There is actually truly no vanishing point due to the fact that the vanishing point would exist in the middle of her forehead if there was one. So due to this, it's actually a layered background. It's almost as if there are three scenes layered, one on top of the other. You have Mona Lisa in the front, you have this secondary scene right here in the back, capped off by this small mountain range, and then you have the third scene in the back. Okay? Now, speaking of these different scenes, which is actually interesting, is the contrast of these scenes, giving to try and use that depth perspective without having a vanishing point. If you look at that second layer of scene behind Mona Lisa, it actually appears as though that there is a light colored and lively scene on that second layer. Maybe springtime, summer, things are actually seem to be alive and living, in contrast to that third layer all the way in the back, which is an icy set of mountains and a cool body of water. So that is another reason why artists and art historians for years and years and years have considered this to be a very, very good example of high Renaissance artwork. Now, I know I've loaded you down with a heck of a lot of information just now, and I could keep going and going and going. I could talk about the use of layering as well as the use of fabric definition that Da Vinci used, which would actually later implore other artists like Michelangelo to actually try and replicate the inane, very small details of fabric on the human body to try and offer up more realistic ideas, right? But of course, the big ones that we hit on were the gaze, the smile, the hands. We don't really know necessarily when it was completed. We do know, however, where it ended up going, all right? Where it is now is it's located in the Louvre in Paris, right? The National Art Museum in Paris, which was established after the French Revolution. But it had been in Paris ever since his death. Actually, it ended up in France in 1519 because Da Vinci is going to end up dying in France. We'll talk about that stuff later on when we get to Francis I, and he's kind of a weird guy. But it did end up actually going with him to France because he was supposed to be like a protege of Francis I. Now, protege doesn't necessarily mean an apprentice. It can actually mean just somebody that actually is living inside your domicile, actually being somebody that is of high society, or that they're now kind of adopting you into their home, I guess is the word I'm looking for, adopting them into their home where they may actually then later on have an easier death, all right? So now, other interesting things about this particular piece of artwork is that for the longest time, it was always something that the intellectual community knew about, okay? So for hundreds of years, art historians and art critics have always thought the Mona Lisa serves as one of the key markers of exemplary work in the portrait style from the High Renaissance, showing the break between the Middle Ages and the advancement of intelligence that the Renaissance period had to offer. Now, ironically, though, it was not very famous amongst lay people. All right, regular people had no clue what the Mona Lisa was. A lot of this I attribute to the fact that, due to class structure differences, poor people really had no reason to actually appreciate, understand, or ever see art. They would have had to be literate. They would have had to have actually encyclopedias or research materials to even know that it existed, right? So this was not nearly as popular of a piece as it is now. To this day now, though, it is actually currently issued or insured for $100 million and is considered to be priceless. Some people have actually quoted it as worth $1 billion, but it is the most recognizable piece of artwork in the world. So how did you go from no one knowing anything about it except for art historians and professors to everyone knowing exactly what the Mona Lisa is, who made it, and what it looks like? A lot of it has to do with the fact that it ended up being stolen. So in 1911, a museum patron, I guess is the word we're going to use, but a museum goer by the name of Vincenzo Peruggia actually was an Italian nationalist who went in and stole the Mona Lisa because it was not actually being held in any protective device, all right? It wasn't being held behind anything. It was actually sitting out in the Louvre's, what's the word I'm looking for? Exhibit hall. And so he walked up to it, picked it up, walked to a janitor's closet, where he then waited for several hours and then shoved it under his jacket and walked out after the museum had closed. And so this thing was missing for 2 years, right? No one knew where it was. And he kept it on his dining room table for 2 straight years before eventually trying to sell it to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, which is where Sandro Botticelli's Primavera, as well as Sandro Botticelli's Birth of Venus, are actually being stored today. So it's a very famous art museum. He tried to sell it to them. When the art curator, of course, then alerted the Louvre, being like, hey, that painting that y'all made newspapers about and sent worldwide to try and alert the entire world that this famous piece of artwork had been stolen? Yeah, it's here. There's a guy trying to sell it to us right now. So that's how it becomes so well recognized, due to the fact that while it was stolen, newspaper articles and newscasts and radio announcements were made trying to find this artwork and bring it back to its home. So everyone in the world began to learn about it. Like, oh, that's the Mona Lisa, the stolen painting. And so it became canon in the minds of every regular person in existence, basically within the Western sphere of art appreciation. So due to this, Eventually, Vincenzo Peruggia was actually arrested, and he's going to end up in jail for, I think, like 6 months for the crime. And he claimed that he was mad because he said that Napoleon and his army stole it from its rightful home in Italy, which, ironically enough, Vincenzo should have read some books due to the fact that it actually was in France when Da Vinci himself died. All right, so and another cool couple of facts about it, as I know I've gone way over time because I get really excited about this stuff. Sorry about it, but I gave y'all like an exemplary example, or an exemplary example of things that you can know about these artworks. To this day, just so you know, it's a lot smaller than you thought, isn't it? I don't even think I told you that. This is an oil painting on Lombardy white pine wood, okay? So it's oil painting on top of a plank of wood, okay? Because canvas was very uncommon at the time. It would have been very expensive. Going into, though, it's also really small. It's only 30 inches by 21 inches. And it's actually, to this day, contained behind bulletproof glass because it's tried to been vandalized multiple times. In 1956, a woman threw a cup of acid at it, damaging some of the art, or damaging some of the edges of the artwork. And then also in 1956, a guy threw a rock at it. So he actually threw a rock at it, which crashed the entire simple glass screen in front of it and chipped a piece of paint off of one of the edges of the painting. Later on, when it was in Tokyo, a woman tried to spray paint it, but of course, luckily, it was behind glass, so it didn't end up getting hurt. And then also later on, a Russian woman who was mad because the French government didn't allow her to be a nationalized citizen threw a ceramic teacup at it, which it also ended up not being damaged as well. But it is to this day now contained behind bulletproof glass to prevent anyone from trying to damage it. And it sees 8.7 million people per year. 8.7 million people travel to see the Mona Lisa every single year. So that right there is a little snippet, a little expertise idea that you could have wrote a paper on for days with that amount of information about the artwork Mona Lisa. And I know I forgot stuff. I know I left stuff out. I kind of harp on the things that I find really interesting, including the composition, her face, the eyebrows, the eyelashes, the smile, right, the lingering gaze, which is actually looking slightly to your right. So things like that, the hands that took him so much time, the length of time that the painting itself actually took, the layers of the scenery. Those things are the things that are going to be in the paper, okay? The interesting facts can kind of go in as like a little ancillary thing at the end. But that's just right there an example of the kind of expertise knowledge that you're supposed to have in your particular artwork. And if some of you are asking the question, Mr. Terry, why do you think it's so overrated? I just think that there's better works. Now, granted, it's important because it came before many of the works that I find to be so much better, like Michelangelo's David. For example, The School of Athens by Raphael. Those things, to me, seem to be the most quality pieces of high Renaissance ability. The Arnolfini portrait is a great Northern example, but it actually even came before this. So I happen to think that this is good. I just don't think it's the best, okay? If you understand what I'm getting at. Also, though, a little interesting tidbit is this masterpiece was being created at the exact same time that Michelangelo himself was painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling. So these artists were making some of their best works right alongside each other. So I'm going to leave you at that. Talk to you guys later. Y'all have a good one.